I remember that last April, I cut several chayote vines and also trimmed away the messy side branches. I left 2 or 3 leaves on each vine, then found an unused glass jar at home, filled it with clean water, and placed the vines inside for hydroponic rooting. I didn't expect them to grow roots at all. It was just something I did to pass the time. I changed the water occasionally, and when I was busy, I simply left them alone. To my surprise, 1 month later, every vine in the glass jar had grown a large mass of white roots. Looking closely, these roots didn't grow from the cut ends at the bottom. They all emerged from the nodes of the vines, with many tiny new roots growing beside them. I also noticed that some leaves and small buds on the vines had withered. But that's normal. After all, the newly grown roots are still very tender and aren't yet good at absorbing nutrients. They should recover once they're planted in soil. So I quickly prepared a new home for these seedlings by mixing river sand and coconut coir with water. Mixing these two together gives the soil excellent aeration. The tender roots that have just been transferred from hydroponics are most afraid of poor ventilation. This type of growing medium won't cause the roots to rot. Before planting them in soil, I trimmed the overly long branches on the vines, then took out a seedling tray and filled it with the prepared growing medium. I drilled drainage holes in the bottom of these trays, otherwise standing water would easily cause root rot. When planting the seedlings, straighten and spread out the roots. Don't let them stay tangled together in the soil. Then gently cover the spread out roots with soil. In the blink of an eye, 30 days passed. The chayote seedlings were growing vigorously. Several new leaves had appeared, and their thin tendrils were reaching around, looking for something to climb. I turned the entire seedling tray over and found that the area around the drainage holes at the bottom was full of newly grown white roots. The soil at the bottom had been slightly pushed upward by the roots. This is a sign that the roots have become firmly established in the soil. At this stage, they can be planted directly into the ground or transferred into pots. I enjoy growing potted plants, so I plan to plant them in my small yard. So I found several old leaking buckets and transplanted the chayote seedlings into them one by one. A few days later, I found some bamboo sticks and placed them beside the plants at the edge of the buckets to serve as climbing supports. After all, chayote is a climbing plant, so it can't grow properly without a trellis. I secured these wire rings layer by layer onto the bamboo poles with ties, creating a circular climbing frame so its tendrils could wrap around the structure and climb upward. This type of wire is flexible and doesn't rust easily. The trellis saves space and it also provides good ventilation and sunlight for the vines. Since the soil in the bucket is limited, I regularly added more soil around the seedlings and firmly covered the root base so the plants could stand steadily. That way, even after the fruits develop, the vines won't topple over or have their roots damaged. I also made sure to water them regularly and keep the soil moist. Another month and a half passed. Counting from the day the vines were first placed in water, a total of 108 days had gone by. My chayote plant had grown extremely vigorously. The main vine had climbed high along the trellis, the stems had become thicker, and the tendrils were densely wrapped around the frame and wire rings, so I didn't have to worry about it falling over. When I took a closer look, I was surprised to find small flower buds growing at the ends of the vines. At that moment, I knew the plant had truly established itself. Before, I had always worried that the shallow soil in the bucket wouldn't provide enough nutrients. But seeing such strong vines and glossy leaves, I finally felt relieved. To help it flower and bear fruit successfully, the next step was to fertilize it. Chayote prefers neutral soil, so I prepared some charcoal and dried organic nutrients, crushed them, and mixed them together before applying them. When growing in buckets, the biggest concerns are the limited space and waterlogged roots. With charcoal in the soil, excess water can drain through the pores, reducing the chance of root rot. The fertilizer granules release nutrients gently and last for a long time, while also helping keep the soil loose over time. Together, these two materials can also help balance the soil's pH, and they aren't as harsh as chemical fertilizers. Simply put, this combination both nourishes the plant and improves the soil, making it especially suitable for growing chayote in buckets like mine. As time passed, another 10 days went by. The small flowers that had been successfully pollinated by insects had already swollen and developed into small green fruits. Their shape was neat and well-formed, and they felt firm to the touch, showing that fruit set had been very successful. The small flower buds beside them were still swollen and hadn't bloomed yet, while new leaves kept sprouting one after another. This chayote plant was truly impressive. It was already producing fruits, yet the vines were still growing rapidly. Judging by its growth, it would probably produce many more fruits in the future. Its vigor was incredible. 2 more weeks passed, making it exactly 130 days from the time that vine was first placed in water for hydroponic rooting. These chayote plants had finally entered their peak fruiting stage. I truly never expected them to grow this well. Every end of the vines was hanging with fruits of different sizes. Some had already grown plump, while others were still tiny, newly formed fruits, showing that the plant was continuing to produce more. The entire plant had officially entered a highly productive stage, growing and fruiting at the same time. Standing in my little yard and looking at the buckets full of chayotes, I couldn't stop smiling. 130 days may not seem especially long or short, but I had successfully turned a few vine cuttings into plants loaded with fruits. This feeling of creating something from nothing is more satisfying than anything else. Now, all that's left is to harvest the chayotes, cook a delicious meal, and reward myself. That's all for today's sharing. If you also enjoy growing fruits and vegetables, give this method a try.